Nature has taken care of the natural protection of vital human organs. The role of their natural armor is played by a layer of fat and ribs, where the brain is protected by solid bony plates, the average thickness of which in men is 0.25 inches. And interestingly, in women, the thickness of these plates is greater. This is sufficient for the natural hazards that a primate may encounter in life. However, nature didn't anticipate that in the most secure of their organs, ideas would emerge to smelt metal and create weapons capable of effortlessly penetrating that very 0.25 inches of protection. With the emergence of the first civilizations in the Middle East, means of protecting the body and head also appeared. It's possible that something similar existed before, but unfortunately, there's no evidence of it. However, from the ancient Sumerian civilization, an astonishing specimen of the earliest helmet in history has reached us. This war helmet was found in the tomb of Mes-Kalemdug, one of the first kings of the Sumerian city of Ur, who ruled in the 26th century BC, more than 5,500 years ago. It was so long ago that mammoths had not yet become extinct on Earth, and the first pyramid in Egypt had only recently been built. The helmet was made of gold in the shape of the owner's own hair, with a knot at the back and a woven ribbon on top. It was probably passed down through inheritance, so Mes-Kalemdug was likely not the first owner of this headgear. The original helmet is located in Baghdad in the Museum of Iraq. This time, no one gave this valuable exhibit to the British Museum. However, the British created an electrolytic copy of this helmet for their museum. It's difficult to call such a helmet good protection because gold is a very soft metal. But what about the ancient helmet made from 140 wild boar tusks? Now, we will tell you about this remarkable helmet and more. You will learn why Romans had those gruesome helmets shaped like human faces, which helmet was considered the pinnacle of head protection evolution, and why did everyone hate the Crusaders helmet? You've heard all about the Trojan Wars, but depictions of Greeks and Trojans and Corinthian helmets from the classical era aren't entirely accurate. During the time when the heroes of Homer's tales were battling beneath the walls of Troy, they most likely wore helmets made from boar tusks. Helmets crafted from boar tusks were utilized by the Mycenaean civilization from the 17th century BC to the 10th century BC. As the name suggests, these helmets were made from pieces of boar tusks. They were arranged in rows and attached to a leather base lined with felt. Fragments of such helmets are frequently found in Mycenaean archaeological sites. For instance, in Dendra, fragments were discovered alongside a bronze armor in 1960. Crucially, written evidence confirming the existence and use of such helmets on the battlefield has been preserved. A description of a boar tusk helmet appears in the 10th book of Homer's Iliad, when Odysseus arms himself for a night raid on the Trojans. Meriones gave Odysseus a bow, a quiver, and a sword, and put a cleverly made leather helmet on his head. On the inside, there was a strong lining on interwoven straps, onto which a felt cap had been sewn in. The outside was cleverly adorned all around with rows of white tusks from a shiny-toothed boar, the tusks running in alternate directions in each row. Homer specifies that the helmet bestowed upon Odysseus by Meriones was a family heirloom passed down through generations. Though the number of tusks required for a complete helmet varies, it is evident that a considerable number of boars would need to be killed. On average, it took between 40 and 140 boar tusks to make one such helmet, meaning about 50 boars would need to be killed to create a single helmet. However, it's worth noting that such a helmet likely did not provide as effective protection as a bronze helmet. Some leaders may have worn it as a symbol of status or means of identification, but in terms of protective characteristics, it fell short compared to the helmets of a Roman gladiator. Interestingly, it surpassed even the helmet worn by legionnaires in terms of protective capabilities. Gladiatorial fights were an incredible spectacle in ancient times, although they probably seem wild to us now. But to make the fights more exciting and to prevent them from ending after the first blow, gladiators protected the most vital parts of their body with armor, and their heads were adorned with some of the most impressive helmets of antiquity. For instance, the helmet of a Thracian gladiator is likely familiar to you, as it was widely used in the arena. Originally, Thracian gladiators were supposed to be of Thracian origin. Later, the term shifted to describe a set of weaponry regardless of the fighter's origin. The chief adversary of the Thracian was often the Murmillo gladiator, who wore a very similar helmet but with a different crest shape. However, not all helmets were uniform. Take a look at this helmet for example. It seems as though it was crafted not for the gladiatorial arena, but for some horror show. This helmet was worn by the Secutor, a variant of the Murmillo gladiator. Just imagine yourself in the arena when your opponent is clad in such a helmet. It's genuinely frightening. Similar to the Murmillo, the Secutor's helmet also featured a crest. By the way, it's interesting that helmets resembling classic gladiator helmets, like the Kolben helm, were also used in mace tournaments in the late Middle Ages. The aim of this tournament was to knock the crest off the opponent's helmet. Helmets with a birdcage-like visor were often used for these tournaments. I believe those who crafted this helmet were certainly inspired by the gear of gladiators. Just picture it with the crest, as it was used in combat. The design is very similar, but let's return to gladiators. If the helmets we discussed earlier didn't surprise you, what about the provocateur gladiator helmets? Don't think of it as some helmet from a steampunk universe. This helmet depicted a Roman legionary. Interestingly, unlike other gladiator types, this type never fought in the arena with an exposed chest. After all, someone representing a Roman legionary in the arena must not be defeated. When we talk about Roman legionaries, you'll likely envision them in imperial Gallic helmets, and of course, you'd be correct. Such a helmet was indeed popular among Roman soldiers, but it was only used from the 1st to the 3rd century AD. For most of Rome's history, soldiers wore Montefortino helmets. The Imperial Gallic helmet is essentially an upgraded version. The rear part of the helmet was elongated to protect the neck from sword blows. Another rim was added to the front of the helmet, positioned about 3 inches above the first to protect the forehead. It was designed to shield the helmet from sword strikes and head injuries. Note that the ears were left uncovered for the soldier to hear, while metal cheek pieces protected the sides of the face. You might think that this helmet was less protective compared to, for example, the earlier Corinthian helmet preferred by the Spartans. Unlike the Roman helmet, the Corinthian helmet had a more shielded face. However, it's worth noting that Romans had a completely different warfare tactics compared to the Greeks. For instance, the face of a Roman soldier was shielded from arrows, stones, and thrown projectiles by a shield, and during battle, it was more crucial for a Roman to hear the orders of the centurion and see the opponent clearly than to have a covered face, as Romans won primarily due to military tactics. But there were exceptions. For instance, some sources state that the rebellious slaves and gladiators led by Spartacus managed to inflict several serious defeats on the Romans, partly because his gladiators were clad in their typical armor and helmets. Just imagine how incredible the crowd of gladiators looked in their outfits on the battlefield. Romans probably never witnessed a more beautiful spectacle in their lives, especially if it was their final battle. By the way, if you want us to make a video about Spartacus's uprising, let us know in the comments and give a thumbs up to this video, so we'll know this topic interests you. But let's get back to helmets. We've mostly talked about the standard Roman helmets, but wealthy Roman officers and generals had enough money for special orders for themselves. These were not only incredibly beautiful, but also incredibly intimidating. During their brief stay in Britain, the Romans left not only many interesting structures, but also armor, which is still being discovered throughout the territory of England. Take, for example, the Ribchester helmet. The helmet's mask is shaped like a human face, and the craftsmanship is so exquisite that it even looks creepy. However, this helmet did not instill fear in the hearts of Roman enemies, as it was not used in battles, but served as protection during equestrian sports. The Ribchester helmet dates back to the late 1st to early 2nd centuries AD, and is a unique artifact, as only 2 other similar specimens have been found in Britain so far: the Crosby-Garrett helmet and the Newstead helmet. Romans had other extraordinary helmet specimens, like this famous Roman helmet from Bircasso, for example. It's undoubtedly one of the most beautiful Roman helmets ever discovered. Dating back to the 4th century AD, it is made of gilded iron sheets, beautifully adorned with precious stones and an ornament of glass paste, with Greek inscriptions along the edges. You might wonder why this Roman helmet has a shape that significantly differs from the typical Roman helmets we discussed earlier. The reason is that at the end of the 3rd century, there was a complete shift in the construction of Roman helmets. Previous types of Roman helmets were replaced by new forms borrowed from helmets developed in the Sasanian Empire. Now, you've briefly acquainted yourself with almost the entire evolution of Roman helmets. By the way, unlike the Ribchester helmets, this golden helmet was used in battle, making it an even more valuable find. Just as valuable as the 3,000-year-old horned helmet from Denmark, which, although not made of gold, was no less beautiful and historically significant than the Roman helmet. You probably all know about the image of a Viking in a horned helmet, and most of you likely know that it's a myth, as no one from the Norse wore horned helmets during the Viking Age. However, this myth emerged from one remarkable discovery. In 1942, a Danish peat digger was excavating a bog on the island of Zealand and uncovered the first of the now famous pair of horned bronze helmets. Initially believed to be a rare ritual helmet from the Viking Age, it was later determined to be over 3,000 years old, possibly inspired by Sardinian symbolism. If this assumption is correct, it could serve as the first archaeological link between prehistoric Northern Europe and the Mediterranean, separated by the Alps and thousands of kilometers of land and sea obstacles. This makes the helmet not only beautiful, but also incredibly valuable for history. However, the notion that Vikings wore horned helmets during their raids is a myth. There were no horns on their helmets. Nevertheless, despite this, in medieval Europe, blacksmiths sometimes liked to attach horns to the helmets of their customers, if the customers requested it. For example, how about this horned helmet of Henry VIII? This helmet, along with armor, was a gift from the Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian I to the English King Henry VIII. The suit was intended for display at tournaments. It's unclear who the intended wearer of the armor was, but it seems they were created in the likeness of one of Henry's court jesters. The most astonishing thing is how detailed this helmet is. You can even see wrinkles and facial hair on it. Or consider another example, the horned funeral helmet of the von Prank family. This specimen dates back to the 14th century. Essentially, it's just an adorned version of a regular medieval bucket helm, which is a symbol for many of the Crusaders. Perhaps this helmet looks intimidating, but in reality, both Crusaders and knights probably hated it. Trust me, if you wore it, you would have plenty of reasons to dislike it. The Great Helm or Bucket Helm, it seems, originated in Spain and is an evolution of one of the simplest medieval cylindrical helmets. Over time, a facial plate was added, followed by a neck guard. When blacksmiths managed to merge all the parts into a single bucket, the well-known Great Helm emerged. For its time, the bucket-shaped helmet provided excellent protection. One plate overlapped another at the edges, making the helmet's angles one of the strongest points in its design. Additionally, the knight's head was often protected by a soft padded coif and a mail coif. But if this helmet provided such good protection for the knight's head, why wasn't it well liked, you might ask? The problem is that all its advantages end with its good protective properties. Anyone who puts on a bucket helm for the first time and starts fencing in it will quickly want to get rid of this protection. The Great Helm has incredibly poor visibility, a blind spot at the bottom, and it's easy to miss a sword strike from below. Despite special openings, this helmet has poor air circulation, making it difficult to breathe. Another significant drawback is that this construction muffles your voice, making it challenging to give orders in this bucket. Perhaps its most significant downside is that this weight, up to 6 pounds, had to be supported by the neck, as it didn't rest on the shoulders like later medieval helmets. This weight is almost twice the current limit for head protection, 2.2 pounds. You might be wondering, with all these downsides, how is this helmet so popular in the Middle Ages? The reason is that in the High Middle Ages, knights began practicing the couched lance technique, fixing the lance firmly. When used in this way, it seems there was often an unpleasant situation where the opponent's lance struck the shield and slid upward, reaching the face. The primary purpose of the bucket helm then became protecting the face from such a lance strike. Of course, this helmet also protected against arrows and swords, but it made you a poor fencer and especially an archer. However, by the 15th century, the role of infantry increased on the battlefield, and knights stopped getting lance blows to the face so frequently. The armet became the chief knightly helmet. It was the pinnacle of the evolution of medieval helmets. It was the first helmet of its era that completely covered the head while being compact and light. The armet had a movable visor that you could raise at any moment, rested on your shoulders, relieving neck from the burden. Crucially, unlike the bucket helm, the armet was fixed on the knight's head, preventing it from being knocked off by a lance strike. Just look at the construction of this helmet. The most interesting element of this helmet was its movable visor, which, thanks to the imagination of the blacksmiths, had incredibly diverse forms. How about a visor like a peacock, which made the knight look like a futuristic astronaut, or a birdcage visor, as we mentioned earlier? The variety of such visors is simply mind-boggling. Human or monkey face, wolf muzzle, bird beak, the list is probably endless. Which of these helmets would you choose if you were participating in a knight's tournament? Write in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. See you